A very warm welcome to all of you tonight, especially Samira Iran, our speaker tonight, who's joining us from Berlin. Thank you so much for joining us and talking about exploring the knowledge action gap in the fast fashion industry. This talk is part of the Fashion Talk Series 22-23, entitled Between Action and Knowledge. And it explores really the cognitive dissonance of what we know and value and how we live and act in this world. And it is this book title that we already mentioned at the beginning of this series when we talked to Claire Farrell. The World is on Fire, but We're Still Buying Shoes by Alec Leach. That captures in a way what we're exploring very well. And it's the case that we're not just, buying one pair of shoes, but we're buying shoes, all the time. And we are also buying much more than we need. We're constantly buying. We're living in a fast fashion, a hyper fast fashion context nowadays. And is this what we want to explore tonight? Really, the consumption of fashion. The fast fashion industry has only been around in this guise, in this truly hyper fast fashion guise, for about 2 decades. And this is what a fast fashion chain looks like, right? From extraction through to production, consumption, and then also disposal, which is something that is not talked about very much and is going to be facing us with really another dimension and set of huge problems. When we talk about fast fashion, it's not just that it's a system that's come about sort of passively, but it's something that in a way all of us or most of us are part of, and it's something that has been constructed really for the last few decades in a very active way. And of course, part of this landscape of constructing fast fashion is also a landscape of anti-fast fashion activism, and fashion revolution plays an important role. Our speaker today, Samira, is the founder of Fashion Revolution Iran. So that's always also a pertinent link here. In 2015, Fashion Revolution Germany did a particular intervention that I think is relevant to what we're talking about today. In 2015, they placed a bright turquoise vending machine offering T-shirts for €2 on Alexanderplatz in Berlin, which is the central place, or one of the central places and squares in Berlin. And they wanted to test whether people would buy this €2 T-shirt when they're confronted with the conditions in which they were produced. So what they did is when you entered a coin of €2, you were shown images and information about the conditions in which these €2 T-shirts were being produced. And then they were asked, do you still want to buy this €2 T-shirt? And the statistics is that 8 out of 10 shoppers decided against it. So the conclusion, which is very optimistic by Fashion Revolution at that point, was people care when they know. So the knowledge action link was formulated very positively as part of this action. And that's precisely what we want to explore today, because the kind of consequence, the logical consequence would be that people simply don't know. As soon as they're told, they would change the behavior, which is something I think we also realize isn't quite true, because a lot of us know. So really, for what we're wanting to look at tonight, the work of our speakers is very pertinent, and I'm thrilled that Samira Iran, who's working on consumption sustainability, is joining us today. Samira is a postdoctoral researcher and lecturer based at the moment in Berlin at the Technical University in Berlin, and she's also the project at the Hot or Cool Institute in Germany. Her PhD thesis that she completed 2 years ago worked on the topic of sharing economy in the clothing industry. And she's also been working on 2 real-world laboratory projects on sustainable textile consumption and on education for sustainable clothing consumption. She's currently the consortium lead of a citizen science project on decluttering and sustainable consumption, and also a project lead of a project on care economy and sustainable consumption. And in addition to sustainable fashion, her research interests include sharing economy, collaborative consumption, care economy, and consumer behavior. She is, as head, the co-founder of Fashion Revolution Iran and a member of the executive committee of the Sustainable Fashion Consumption Network. Please give a warm welcome, or as warm as possible as we can digitally, to Samira Iran, who's joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Renate, for introducing me and for inviting me here. Hello, everyone, from my side. I'm so excited to be here tonight with all of you, and welcome to my presentation tonight. Actually, I was hoping to be there in Paris in person, but well, because of a few problems I couldn't make it. Next time, hopefully, I will meet you in person. But tonight, we're trying to cover the topic via an online talk, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay. So yeah, tonight I would like to talk about my favorite topic, which is about sustainable fashion consumption. And as Renate mentioned, I am working on the sustainable fashion from the consumption side. And also I'm going to talk about this famous knowledge action or attitude or intention action gap. And so in this regard, my presentation is divided into 2 main parts. First of all, I'm going to talk about sustainable fashion consumption, about the individual behavior, and then move to the next part. So I'm pretty sure you all know about the problems of the current fast fashion industry, which Renate also presented. This linear model of fast fashion industry. So I'm not going to bore you with repeating what you already know, just very quickly mentioning about the social problems of the industry that we all know about, the low wages, child labor, but also health problems. And if you are interested in knowing more about the social problems of the industry, and you haven't already had the chance to watch this amazing documentary, The True Cost, I'm encouraging all of you to go and watch it. It's not new. I think it's made in 2015, but still, every time I personally watch this documentary, I am being shocked by the problems that we are having in this industry. Besides, the ecological problems of the industry have been kind of like ignored for a long time in the academia, but recently we have seen that, for example, research showed that 10% of global CO2 emissions are caused by the fashion industry, or a report by European Environmental Agency showed that textile and fashion are estimated by the European Environmental, estimated as the 4th highest pressure category for the use of primary raw materials and water after food and housing and transport, and the 5th one when we talk about greenhouse gas emission. And all of these problems have been there probably since 2000, when the fast fashion labels expanded dramatically, labels that we all know like H&M, CNA, and many other brands. They started to introduce these ever faster cycles of production, and their own like collections that probably every 2 weeks we are seeing new collections in these stores, and then consumers started to just purchase and discard in the fastest cycle that we have ever seen. So it's clear that we need sustainability in the fashion industry, but maybe before talking further, it's good to have a definition of this term, sustainable fashion. What does sustainable fashion mean? Means sustainable fashion refers to clothing which is designed, produced, used, reused, and disposed in a way that is aligned with the concept of sustainable development. So what is important in this definition is that when we talk about sustainable fashion, we are not only talking about the production side, but also about the consumption and post-consumption side. So if we have a look at the systematization of sustainable fashion, we can, as I said, the production side is important. So in the production side, we can talk about which material are we using, if the material are sustainable or not, about human resources, whether this labor is paid fairly or not, for example, also about the intellectual resources, about how much waste does, for example, the patterns producing, because as you know, for example, when in a factory they want to produce a t-shirt, they just put layers of material on the top of each other and then put the pattern and then cut the fabric and then throw away the rest of the material, which is actually made using a lot of resources. And so it's being wasted. I think 20% of the material is being wasted in this phase. Also, the consumption part is important. This is the part that we are going to focus on for the lecture today. And in the consumption part, we are going to talk about three phases of purchasing, usage and post-usage. And to be sure that in both of these sections, we are having sustainability, or that everything is going towards sustainability, we need sustainable governance. We need laws and regulation to make sure that production, but also the consumption side, is sustainable. Okay, so we are going to focus on sustainable consumption of clothing, but before I go and talk to you about what is the behavior that is considered sustainable in the fashion industry, I would like to answer a very, very important question here, and that's about who should consume fashion more sustainably. So when we talk about like the importance of the role of consumers, that we as consumers have the responsibility to consume fashion more sustainably, do we talk about every individual in the world? That's the question we want to answer. So if we look at the recent report that we at Hot or Cool Institute released last year, I was lucky to be a co-author also in this report. We have had a look at the inequalities that are existing among G20 countries. So we have seen that the average carbon footprint resulting from fashion consumption in 14 out of the G20 countries surpass the emissions limits set by the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree target. But when we look at different countries, we see by the analysis that the significant inequalities are existing among these G20 countries. It means that, for example, in the UK, the richest 20% emit 83% more carbon than the 1.5 degree target, while 74% of the Indonesian consume fashion below the sufficiency level. The G20 high-income countries, like, for example, Australia, France, and Germany, where we live, are expected to reduce their fashion footprints by 60% on average by 2030. But when we look at the upper middle income countries like Argentina, Brazil, China, and so on and so forth, they are required to reduce their footprint by over 40% by 2030. And in contrast, when we look at the lower middle income countries like India and Indonesia, we see that they are already consuming below the 1.5 degree limit. So it's important to take this into consideration, that which consumers are we talking about, and even within the countries we have seen inequalities. Like, for example, a representative sampling of G20 countries show that the lowest quintile accounts for 6 to 11%. While, for example, the highest quintile accounts for 36 to 42% of the emission. Therefore, it is also important that within the countries, we recognize that when we talk about reducing, we are mostly talking about the richest 20% of the citizens. So in sum, on average, fashion consumption of the wealthiest 20% lead to 20 times more emission than that of the poorest 20%. However, this ratio varies significantly across countries depending on their level of income inequality. Okay, so knowing this, we should take into consideration that we, people who are living in France, Germany, and the countries alike, are more responsible to reduce our fashion consumption and our footprint in this regard. So now let's have a look at how we can consume fashion more sustainably. For this, we are going to look at these three phases of purchasing, usage, and post-usage, starting from the very important phase of purchasing. So when we ask consumers, how do you know which product is sustainable to buy, they very quickly go and talk about the factors that are important for them. For example, they say we look if the product is made out of organic raw materials, or if they're made locally, or if they are vegan. And we are also looking at the labels and standards that are showing us whether these products are produced in a sustainable manner. But the problem with all of these standards and logos is that there is still a lack of awareness of eco labels from the consumer side. It means that maybe consumers know that, okay, GOTS certificate shows me that this product is produced in a better way, but they don't exactly know what is considered in this GOTS certificate. So inconsistencies in the standards that eco labels adhere to is also adding to the problem of these standards. But let's keep that in mind, but go further. And I have here a question from all of you. I would like to know, how many pieces of clothing do you have in your wardrobe? So you can give me a guess. It's very difficult to say that just right now, but maybe you can make a guess and write it in the chat. Of course, you don't need to count underwears and socks, but just generally thinking about the size of your wardrobe and make a guess. How many pieces of clothing do you have? $30. Okay, interesting. 500, 230, 150, 50, 160, 200, 55, 500, 50, 50, 100, probably 100 plus, 30, 50. Okay, amazing, great. Over 100, maybe 120. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So we did a study in the southern part of Germany, and we asked this question from our participants. We asked them, just make a guess, how many pieces of clothing do you have? And then what we did is that we literally went to their homes, went to their wardrobes, and we counted their pieces of clothing. What we realized out of this study was that consumers underestimate their number of clothing by at least 35%. This means that I encourage you, I'm not going to come to your place, thank God, but I encourage you to go and really count your clothing items. But usually these numbers show us that we even are not aware of what we have, what we own, what is out there. We just keep these garments in our wardrobes for years and years without even being aware of what we have. So if we look at if we look at the numbers in all the kind of Western countries, like the wealthier Western countries, we can find this very similar numbers. But I have an example of Germany. In Germany, on average, 60 garments are being yearly bought by each consumer, and 40% of them is rarely or never worn. This is a huge number. This is an idling capacity that is, as I said, that is staying in our wardrobes for years and years. So the question is, if all of us, or almost all of us, have enough clothing, why do we need to think about purchasing new pieces of clothing? Maybe a better alternative practice is, first of all, to declutter. So to reflect on what do we own and why. And maybe we can use one of the existing methods. I can also recommend Marie Kondo method for decluttering and minimalism, and just reduce the amount of our items in our wardrobe. Here we have this project, what Renate also mentioned. The project is called My Thing, I Am What I Do Not Own. And here we are working with over 1,000 participants to see how they can declutter in a way that at the end it's more sustainable, because just decluttering and throwing away clothing items is not probably the best or most sustainable way. Another alternative practice is collaborative fashion consumption, where consumers get engaged into alternative way of acquiring clothing, like, for example, through gifting, lending, sharing, renting, leasing, or secondhand. And through this, they are acquiring new pieces of clothing, but without buying really newly made items. We are hearing more and more about clothing swapping parties or clothing libraries all around Germany. I'm pretty sure in France, you can also find these initiatives, and all of these are helping by like offering alternative practices to the consumers. Coming back to the Hot or Cool report, we have seen that, because in the Hot or Cool report, we looked at different scenarios. We had different scenarios, and we wanted to see what scenario brings more more positive side or reduce the negative side of consumption the best. And we have seen that the most effective way to reduce the carbon footprint of our inflated wardrobes is to simply buy less. So if you want to do something good for the environment, it's better to stop purchasing. This is the best probably solution that we have. And reducing purchases of new clothing will lead to reductions over 4 times higher than the next best solution, which is about keeping garments longer. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And over 3 times higher than what is considered achievable through accelerated decarbonization of the fashion industry. So you can see how important is this purchasing phase, and how important is just avoid buying new pieces of clothing. Then we move to the next phase, which is about sustainable usage. And this phase is actually a very, a very extended phase. So I can talk about this alone for an hour. So I just picked up a few points here, and I would like to start from washing and caring. So it's important to look at how consumers take care of their clothing items, how they wash and care about their items. So by looking at the survey by Fashion Revolution in 2020, they asked consumers about a few behaviors that they had regarding clothing consumption. Just mention 2 items here. It's a long survey. You can go on their website and read about the rest of the outcomes and results. But here, what I have here is that they realized that only 48% of consumers wash clothing only when dirty. It means that more than half of their consumers wash clothing that are not even dirty. So the question is, why do we wash our clothing at all if they are not dirty? And 40% of them wash clothing at 30 degrees Celsius or lower. It means that most of the people are washing clothing items at high degree temperature. And we know that washing often and on a high degree, it means that we are wasting a lot of energy and water. So looking only at the way that we wash our clothing, we can have an impact on reducing environmental problem of the fashion industry. Another point by washing is about the microplastics. Now we know that 35% of microplastics in our oceans are coming from textiles, and laundering of 6 kilograms of synthetic materials could release between almost 138,000 to 730,000 fibers per wash. It means that depending on what material is our clothing made of, a lot of fibers and microplastics are being released by every every round of washing into the oceans. This is also a very interesting graphic that I have here. It shows that the more we wash one piece of clothing, the less microplastics are being released into the ocean. It means that, so if we are using our clothing for a longer time, or if we are using secondhand clothing, we are again helping reducing environmental effect of clothing consumption. So Renate mentioned something very interesting in the beginning. I want to just very quickly also mention that if you look at, for example, Maslow hierarchy of need model, you can see that clothing is mentioned as one of our basic human needs. But do we also behave nowadays with our clothing as to to fulfill one of our basic human needs? I don't think so. We don't use clothing only to protect us from the heat or from the cold weather, but it's more about fulfilling our desires, the desire to have a variety of outfits, and also other desires. And if you, for example, look or talk to the older generation, like to your grandparents, to our grandparents, they would say that clothing pieces had a higher value for them. But right now, when we go and buy a €2 t-shirt, probably doesn't have that much of a value for us anymore. So at the end, this all leads that garments with a shortened lifespan are now being created and their usage behavior resembles a disposable product. And that's something that we should avoid by just using our clothing longer. This also brings a lot of environmental benefit with it. Keeping garments in use longer and more often has an impact on greenhouse gas emission, in that if consumers are more actively partaking in circular practices, like, for example, what we saw in collaborative consumption, 143 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions could be saved by 2030. However, the relation between clothing durability and acquisition is unfortunately not as straightforward, as garments are not usually purchased on the basis of replacement. It means that we are not nowadays buying clothing because we really are in need, or we need to replace one piece of clothing with another, but we just again, out of our desires and just wishes, are going to add to our wardrobes. So an alternative practice here could be to have a capsule wardrobe, to have less amount of owned clothing, but having only items that can be combined well with each other, and that can be used for longer time, timeless, like the items that are having timeless design, and all of this can lead to a more sustainability in this industry. And going to the next level, sustainable post-usage, here we can talk about the wasteful fashion consumption. We all know how many tons and tons of clothing are being discarded every year. Like, for example, looking at Germany, an annual collection volume of 15.3 kilogram per capita is being discarded yearly. So here we are hearing a lot from different brands that they are offering take-back systems, that they are promising us to recycle what we don't need. One of these examples is H&M. I think I have seen take-back systems there since a few years. They encourage consumers to bring back what they don't want to use, and they promise that they are going to recycle. But the truth is that less than 1% of the materials used to make clothing are recycled into new garments after disposal by consumers, representing a huge loss of raw materials while growing our waste mountains. And this is because we are having a lot of garments made out of mixed materials, for example, or garments that are having parts in them that are not easily being separated from each other, so they can actually, to be honest, currently we don't have a good technology to recycle all of these garments. So if you look at another example of H&M take-back system, we are talking about H&M a lot today, but it's actually for many of the brands the same. It appears it would take 12 years for H&M to use up to 1,000 tons of fashion waste. This was the amount of clothing they produced in about 48 hours. This has been said by Siegel a few years back, but you can hear or see that, like, maybe we can say that these are all greenwashing at the end. So these are not bringing us forward with sustainability. So an alternative practice here would be upcycling and repairing our own clothing, keeping our own clothing for longer time, and not exporting our clothing to also other countries. That's also another problem we have in the post-usage phase, that we think we donate our clothing and we are happy about it. But actually, I have a colleague who is coming from Ghana, and he is the founder of the Revival, and they are working with post-consumer waste in Ghana. And he was telling me, walking in Ghana, in some districts, you can see winter jackets, winter clothing just on the street or on the shore, and you can ask yourself why these clothing are being imported in Ghana or exported from other countries to the country where the weather is always warm. They don't need even our winter clothing, but we are still feeling good donating our clothing to other countries that they don't even need our clothing. So maybe a better option is just to keep our items into the cycle by ourselves. So coming to a wrap up in this section, it's just that we in our report of Hot or Cool, we suggest that this is only a suggestion, a sustainable wardrobe. So we can, with these, you can probably make a rather more sustainable wardrobe. I'm sorry if it's too small. It was just a lot of information in one graph, so I hope you can see it. So we suggested that we need, as consumers, maybe 72 garments for 2 seasons of summer and winter. We need to expand the use time of our garment by 90% of our garment for 9 more months. We need to minimize our closet. We need to carefully curate the content of our closet. We need to avoid impulse shopping, keeping inactive clothing in our wardrobe. We need to avoid online shopping, excessive laundry. We need to have more attachment to our garments, to love and cherish the garments we own, to get to know the story behind the garment and get to know the textile material. We need to also take good care of our garment, to learn to maintain them correctly, repair and mend. And at the end, we need to also get engaged more in alternative consumption practices, secondhand fashion swapping, leasing, redesigning, and altering, and such things. And if we are engaging ourselves in all of this, probably we can have a sustainable wardrobe at the end. Okay, now let's go back and have another look at the results of the Fashion Revolution survey. I'm sorry, just a minute. So they have asked their participants how many people have tried to buy clothing in the more sustainable way in the past 12 months. So probably they were talking about sometime in 2019. And you can see that only 20% of people they were buying clothing made in an environmental responsible manner. Only 11%, for example, were buying clothing certified organic, or only 9% try to avoid purchasing. And the question arises here is that why are few of the alternative and sustainable consumption practices are being implemented so far? And here we come to the point of the presentation, to the second point of the presentation, where we talk about this gap between knowing about the problems, knowing about the solutions, but not behaving accordingly. So for my PhD, I used the model of theory of planned behavior to have a look at collaborative fashion consumption. But from other studies, we can see this very similar result more generally about sustainable fashion consumption. So I used the results of my study to talk about this concept. So I wanted to see what factors are influencing the behavior of consumers when we talk about collaborative fashion consumption. So in this model, I had 3 factors of attitude: having a positive attitude toward collaborative fashion consumption, for example, having a positive social norms in this regard. It means that friends and families around us are agreeing with us that collaborative fashion consumption is a good way of acquiring clothing, and having the good behavior, like having a control over our behavior. It means that we have the possibility to get engaged into the collaborative fashion consumption. And the models shows, or in this study, I could show that these 3 items can influence the intention toward collaborative fashion consumption, and that positive intention toward collaborative fashion consumption can influence the behavior at the end. But when looking at the result, we can see that, of course, or not of course, but here we can see that attitude is the most important factor influencing the behavioral intention. But at the end, the actual behavior only can be predicted up to 22% from the intention. And this shows us that even if we have a positive attitude, and if we talk about the knowledge comes even before attitude here, somewhere here in the model. So even if we know about the topic, even if we have the positive attitude, even if we have the positive intention to act in a certain manner, at the end, we might, there's a high chance that we behave differently. So this is what we call the knowledge action gap, or we can also talk about attitude behavior gap or intention behavior gap. Basically, all of them are talking about the same problem. So, but just if we talk about knowledge behavior gap, the gap is bigger than when we talk about attitude behavior gap. And if we are talking about attitude behavior gap, the gap is bigger than intention behavior gap. So, but at the end, all of them are talking about the same issue. So let's have a look at the factors influencing this intention behavior gap. So maybe the first one that comes to mind are the ethical factors. So if we as consumer have ethical values, for example, and we know what is happening in the fashion industry, why aren't we behaving in this way? Is that the problem is that the importance of the ethical considerations in purchasing decisions might be overshadowed by other factors, such as, for example, perceived conflict between making sustainable choices and fashionable choices. It means that even if you know about all of this problem, even if you have a good intention, positive intention toward consuming sustainably, but at the end, when you want to buy a piece of clothing, you think that, okay, this piece of clothing is made under sustainable production factors, but this one is more fashionable. I like this one better. It's more high, it's more possible that you pick the second one because of your fashion style. That's one of the problems that we have. Other factors including price, because the sustainable products are perceived to be more expensive. Experience, if you have a good or bad experience with sustainable fashion before. Lack of information, you don't, like what we talked about, the standards, like for example, you don't know which product to choose. Quality perception, or individual characteristics like demographics, like for example, how high or low is your income, how well you are educated, which gender do you have, how old are you. All of these demographics can influence your final decision making. Your lifestyle, the values, knowledge, and perceived behavior control, as we talked about. Social norms, what people around you are talking about. Situational factors like promotions that we every day receiving from companies. All of these factors and many more are intervening between consumption intentions and actual behavior. You can see here that it's a very, very complex phenomenon. It's not that easy that you say, okay, I know about the problem and I want to change my behavior, but there are many different factors influencing the final behavior. And to make it even more complicated, even the size of this gap also is also attributed to the benefits that the product offers, as consumers mostly purchase products to fulfill their needs or self-interest, we know from different lines of research that egoistic motives are the most important motives at the end that are influencing consumption behavior of people. So at the end, whatever we do is that it is very important that consumers perceive the benefits of the product and not only knowing about the background of the product. So these elements, there are different categorizations of all of these factors. One categorization is provided by Park and Lin in 2018. They divided these elements into 3 categories of individual characteristics. For example, if an individual thinks that by this decision making, they can have a positive influence on sustainability or not. So like we're talking about self-efficacy, for example, product characteristics, and also socio-demographic variables. All of these are influencing this gap and also the size of the gap. So let's talk now about how, or some suggestions about how to close this gap. How can we overcome this problem? I would say we can start from making production more visible again. Right now, we living in countries like France or Germany, we don't know even where our products are made in. So we have no idea about how these products are made, who made this product, and under which condition. Maybe if, again, you ask the older generation, they remember that back then when they wanted to buy a pair of shoes, probably they were going to a shop where a man in the back side of the shop was making the shoes, and in the front side of the shop, they were selling them. So they could directly, or dressmakers, they could directly be in contact to people who were making these products. These photos, I made these photos when I was living in Australia. So it is. There are also other examples of such shops, but I like this shop because maybe you cannot see, but the man behind in the back part of the shop was making the bags, and then he was selling the bags in the front part of the shop. And I was just observing the consumers for a bit in this shop, and I was seeing that consumers were valuing what they were seeing. They were valuing every detail that he was making for the bag. So for them, it was very different probably than going to a chain store and purchase a piece of bag. So I say that making production visible again can influence consumers to change their behavior. Also, mindful consumption, just knowing exactly why we are consuming, what we are consuming, how we are consuming. And for this, we probably need mindfulness training. Here, I can recommend you to have a look at a project that we had a few years back in our department. It was about how mindful consumption can lead to sustainable consumption. Another idea is about education, but as we said, this is very funny because we say that knowledge cannot lead us, the possibility that only knowing about the problem is not enough to change the behavior. But at the end, we need education for sustainable consumption. But maybe instead of just educating about unsustainability, just telling people what is wrong in the industry, what is wrong in their consumption, it's better to educate them for sustainability. It's better to educate them about the solutions and what can they do. So offering consumers practical courses or workshops can be a good option, like, for example, enabling them to learn by doing, or decreasing the entry level to the sustainable consumption. This photo is from a sewing cafe that we organized in the southern part of Germany, where we provided consumers with everything they needed, like sewing machines, materials, patterns, trainers, everything that they needed, so that they could come in just easily and make a piece of clothing or repair their own clothing. And by this, we help them have a very simple and easy entry to the world of sustainable fashion consumption. Another example is from our another real world laboratory project, which is called BN Textile Labor. In this project, we went to the schools and we co-created ideas together with pupils to help them learn about sustainable fashion. We co-created the ideas, and then we offered them different workshops about printing and sewing using a zero waste pattern and so on and so forth. So maybe just no matter if in formal or informal institutions we want to educate consumers about sustainable fashion, we should like distance ourselves a little bit from theoretical background and just moving toward more practical knowledge. But beside all of this, of course, we need affordable and accessible sustainable options. The industry needs to make sustainable options more affordable and accessible to the consumers. This can also be achieved, for example, through governmental policies, such as tax incentive for sustainable brands or regulations on unsustainable practices. It can also be achieved through industry collaborations, such as partnerships between sustainable fashion brands and consumers, because if you integrate consumers' ideas into your product, the possibility that they like these products and they get attached to this product is higher, and they probably use this product for a longer time. Another idea would be to offer consumers tools and resources to identify sustainable products. Here I come back consumers can be empowered to take actions by providing them with tools and resources. Here I come back to the idea of standards and logos. And I don't know if you know, but in Germany we have, I don't know if there is a similar thing in France, probably there is, I don't know about it. But in Germany we have this green button standard, which actually is criticized also here, but I would say that it's actually a good idea, because they try to integrate many different environmental and social aspects into one logo, and try to educate consumers that, okay, you don't need to know about many different labels, but if you see this label on a piece of product, you can somehow be sure that it's produced under more or less sustainable conditions. Another example is I can give from our own project, which is funded by German Ministry of Education and Research, that we are developing a toolkit for sustainable decluttering. As I said before, only decluttering of excess of our wardrobe might not be the best solution, because if people don't know how to declutter, they might get rid of their clothing items, and then the next day they just go again and shop to fill the closet or the wardrobes. So it's important to have good tools for sustainable decluttering. So I come to the end of my presentation. So just to wrap it up and to have a summary of what we talked about, experts agree that the clothing user plays a crucial role in achieving sustainable clothing consumption, emphasizing on the role of consumers, on the role of all of us individuals, because they are the ultimate decision makers in what clothing items is being bought, how a clothing item will be utilized, and for how long. So it's important that it's obvious that we play a very important role here. By educating and engaging consumers in new practices focused on the purchasing and usage-based decision-making can be strengthened, and positive results can be seen across the entire clothing consumption cycle. And last but not least, the gap between knowledge and action should be minimized. That's something we know. But to close this gap, different stakeholders, including governments, producers, and consumers, should join forces. Just focusing on consumers and giving them bad conscience about what they do is not bringing us anywhere. So we need a collaboration, a very tight collaboration between different stakeholders to make some changes happen. So at the end, I wanted to show you, I forgot to tell you about this. So at the bottom of my presentation, you saw two numbers that were growing. So my question is for you to give a guess, or if maybe you know already, what do you think these numbers are presenting? Maybe you can write in chat what you think these numbers are presenting. Amazing. Yes. You there are really good guesses. So 293,200 is the number of clothing that has been purchased in the past 45 to 50 minutes in Germany, and 4,800 is amount of is the kilogram amount of the clothing that has been discarded in the past 45 to 50 minutes, and all of this is in our hand. So with changing our consumption behavior, we can of course change these numbers, which are actually very important. So I would like to finish my presentation with a nice very short video. I hope you can hear the voice, but if not, it's also fine. You can also watch it. Oh, I came out. Sorry. Maximizing. Yeah. So yeah, I don't say that only with this one question we can change the industry, but what I can say that becoming active, we can all together change the industry. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the question and discussion afterwards.
Thank you very much, Samira, for this fascinating talk, and also for the incredible information that you shared with us from your own research, from the research that you did at the Hatchakul Institute, that really contextualizes the issues around sustainable consumption so well. So we now have time to take some questions. And it would be great, you can either put them in the chat, but I think it's always also nice if you pose them directly. So feel free to put your hand up, open your camera. It's always nice for us to see who we're speaking with. Yeah, feel free to ask some questions and use the time we have with Samira. Maybe I can start with the first question. I was really fascinated by at the beginning, your important contextualization of, maybe we can call it consumption justice. You know, this idea from taking it from climate justice to see, okay, when we talk about the reduction of consumption, who are we talking about? So another way of thinking about redistribution, because a lot of the time sustainability is presented as this global and globally applicable term and concept. And I think that's really important. And can you say a little bit more of how you think we can achieve this consumption justice?
Yeah, I think that's for me, it was also a very important part to mention, because I most of the time I see this misunderstanding that when we talk about consumption, people think, or our audience think that we are saying everyone should change their behavior. But maybe it is true, but that everyone should change their behavior. But for example, people who are living in poverty in some countries, they should change their behavior in terms that they are going to consume more. And we are going to change our behavior in terms of consuming less. So when we talk about these concepts, consumption generally in different fields, we need to have segmentation of consumers, and we need to always mention about, when we talk about the solutions for who? Solutions for which group of consumers? And if we understand and accept that, even in policy making, we can target, we can have targets for our solutions. And without this, it doesn't work, because I come originally from Iran, and every time I talk about sustainable fashion in an Iranian institution, for example, students are being confused sometimes, because they're like, okay, I don't have this much, this amount of clothing. I already go and ask our local, I don't know, tailor to make me a dress when I need one, you know. So like the solutions we have here is not applicable there. So I think it's important to just have this targeting, segmentation and targeting for promoting sustainable consumption generally, and also in the field of fashion.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Please make yourself heard or seen.
Well, I have one more question. As you said, sustainability is dissected into economic, ecological, and social sustainability. And now you're talking obviously with consumers as well, but I think for the most of us, maybe in 10 years, you would be talking to producers. And wouldn't it make more sense, like in general, not as for now, but in general, to part the topic of sustainability to educate different groups? For example, talking in schools about economic sustainability concerning consumption, and talking to, for example, fashion design students about the ecological things, about maybe how to create a more sustainable garment, because as you said, you can't create sustainable fashion in general because consumption is not sustainable. And yeah, wouldn't that make more sense, like for every educational institute to have a focus on the part of sustainability that makes the most sense to them and to their students?
Totally, I totally agree with you, that generally, like, the focus is different in different institutions, and even for my presentation, I always focus in different parts. For example, for this presentation, by intention, I took all the parts about production and governance of sustainable fashion, because we wanted to talk about the actual actions, you know, and the actual sustainable behavior. But of course, you have to put this emphasis for different institutions, for different group of students or audience. But still, like, when I always say that about the like, consumption should be added to everything, because we, at the end, we are all consumers, no matter if we need to consume more or less or whatever. We are consumers, and we should know about the topic. We should know about our rights and responsibilities and all of this. So, but I totally agree. Yeah, of course, if I am like, here we have AMD, Academy of what is it called? AMD, Academy of
Fashion and design.
Mode design, I think, in German. I don't know. Yes, fashion design. Thank you. And there, when I teach, like, when I talk to their students, it's more about how to design sustainably, how to use zero waste patterns. I don't know, different kind of, you know, that's probably, yeah. So yeah, you're right. The content should be presented to the right audience. That's right. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
I can maybe ask because it's a thing that I think about a lot, because I've known about the problems of the consumption and also the production of fashion for a few years now. And I think a lot of people know about it, as you showed in your picture, like how it affects, like how people know about it, but the knowledge still doesn't affect the action that they're taking. So I'm thinking, I have a really hard time I know like we can take responsibility and change something by our own behavior, but I think it would be like making so much more sense to like put the responsibility on the companies that produce in a stupid way, because I also didn't really understand yet, how can we make people act differently? Because like educating them is obviously not enough. And I think the problem is gonna like also just grow in time, because more people will be able to purchase more things, as a bigger population is gonna have more access to more like money and capital.
Yeah, really great question. Thank you for asking this question. You are absolutely right. We need to talk to companies. We need to talk to governments. We need to talk to policymakers. That's why I said we need really a joint force to change things in the fashion industry, right? But also, like when we talk about the consumption part, is that like for example, coming back to this report that we recently wrote. Sorry, I talked a lot about this report, but I think there are really interesting parts in this report that can help us with this discussion today. We came to the conclusion that for meeting the Paris Agreement in the fashion industry regarding consumption, each consumer can buy up to 5 pieces of clothing per year, right? So, but if you are saying that to consumers, you should also talk to the producer about this, right? They have to change their strategy. They have to stop promoting these ultra fast fashion products and all of this. You are absolutely right. Like there are different stakeholders. We need all of them to be on board. And the only reason I am working and in our network also, we are focusing ourselves on the consumption side, is that on the policy level specifically, the consumption phase has been ignored till now, because they don't want to talk about this, and they always talk about like thinking about having new labels, thinking about new standards. All of these are like important, but a little bit old-fashioned. We need other solutions, we need other ideas, and we need to push them with different stakeholders. But you are absolutely right. Like the producers are as important, or maybe even more important. But again, we as consumers, we can also ask them, we can also push things forward. So yeah, I hope I answered your question. It's just like a very complex question, I think.
Yeah, no, you did. And then I have a follow-up question, and that would be, do you have like hands-on advice for me to like for organizations that I could join? Or like, because I find it also really hard, because political resistance it's not really easy, I think, at the moment, against the system, because there's also like everybody also we in the like Western world also profit from making, like pushing away the production and stuff. And I think also people here don't think it's important enough, because they don't feel right now the direct consequences. Like
Yeah, I mean, there are many different organizations working in this field, but I am working with Fashion Revolution since many years, and I know that they are, for example, Fashion Revolution Germany is pushing to make a law for supply chain of the textile industry this year. So in that regard, you can, like, joining such NGOs, you can also push for better policies in this regard, and that's very important. We need more people in such NGOs to be able to have a louder voice to be heard. I think I can suggest you to join Fashion Revolution, because I am also working and I know them, I know how they work, but I know a lot of other NGOs are working in this field, like for example Clean Clothes Campaign. There are many others, but yeah, no matter to which which of the good organizations you join, it's important that you do something.
I also have a follow-up question to your first question, Amy. Talking about these different actors that come to, or elements that come together, that need to be addressed, or where change needs to happen. And it seems to be that there's an elephant in the room, which is the economic system, which is capitalism. There was a very frank article by Jonathan Friedman in the Guardian, where he was criticizing concepts of sustainable consumption. Said, it doesn't matter whether you have a recyclable coffee cup that you take to Starbucks every day, as long as we have this political and economic system that has the goal of the maximization of profit. We're moving around very small pieces of chess on a very inconsequential board. So I'm wondering, in a way, where that sits in your discussion. I know it's a big question there.
Yeah, that's as you said, it's an elephant in the room, and with everything we do, we are fighting a little bit against capitalism. But if you come and say, hey, let's destroy capitalism, no one would listen to you, I guess. So you need to take small steps toward a bigger goal. And of course, economic sustainability is probably the most important thing that we should achieve. But I think that's, as you said, it's very difficult to address. I just can't say that, but yeah, of course.
I just have a question. You might have addressed this, I joined late, but what would you say to larger corporations or companies whose goal is to sell clothes in order to survive? Kind of what Renate was saying, but what would you say to them in terms of how to, I guess, market a product that can counter overconsumption and still be able to survive as businesses?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say that, because I was on a panel on sufficiency last week. It was in Sciences Po, and we talked about sufficiency in the clothing consumption, and we also talked about the fact that we are going through a transition phase. All of us, consumers, producers, everyone, and in this transition phase, some people are going to lose their jobs. Some economic systems are going to be obsolete. Some linear fashion production models are going to be changed. So if the retailers who are selling now these fast fashion products want to keep on going with their current system, of course, if we go through this transition, they will lose their marketplace. Of course, there is no other way for this. But if they accept the idea that the transition is happening and they have to also alter their business model, they will find ways to survive. And we know big companies, like, for example, I can give you just an example. There are also other examples, like Filippa K is a Swedish company, and they have I don't know if it is still valid, what I want to say. I haven't heard about this for a few years now, but they had their own secondhand shop. So they were selling their own secondhand fashion items. And I was in a conference and I talked to their CEO, and she said they didn't have a loss. They didn't have any profit loss. having this second-hand shop. They like the consumers who are coming to this shop. It doesn't stop them from buying new pieces of clothing. So anyway, I just wanted to say that the circular business models are out there. They can try them. There are different ideas. We have really good ideas for the alternative business models, and they have to alter their systems. That's the way out of this problem. And at the end, yeah, we are going to, like, it's like any other transition. I don't think that you can mention one big transition that has worked well for everyone. We always have people who are suffering, but at the end, it's for a better result. So yeah, that's something I can tell you.
Thank you.
Samira, I was also interested in the sustainable wardrobe model that you presented from the Hotepur Institute, and seeing that we have fashion communication students here and fashion design students. I wonder if we could briefly go back to that model, and if you could say something about the way you developed this.
Yeah, actually, it's through a very complex calculation system, and I should say that I give one of my colleagues was responsible for this part, for the calculation of the footprint, but they went through different scenarios. So we had, I think, 5 different scenarios, and then we had a look at, for example, would it be more environmental sustainability sustainable if we reduce the energy that is consumed for clothing consumption, or if it's like just something like that. And then at the end, we came up with the best solution. So if you see here, for example, that avoiding is playing a big role, it's because this has brought the best or the most important environmental benefit for the wardrobe. So how we came up with this is like there is a very complex calculation behind this, but at the end we came to the point that if this is being implemented, at the end it can keep all of us below this 1.5 degree target of Paris Agreement.
Thank you. And is there something on the methodology in the report?
Yes. It's explained very into detail. But if you look at the report and if you have any question, please come back to us. But I think if we want to talk about it here, it's going to take time.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm happy to talk about this with you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just looked at it and I thought, we could develop a design project or a communication project around this. I think it's a really fascinating. It's a really
and I should tell you, if we can maybe come back to this point together, because we are developing a project based on this together with a few colleagues of mine, and maybe we can work on this together. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you only see the way we really consume fashion and really how we buy fashion? Do you think we can only change that in the way that we change the way we act, or do you also think there are like technology ways of changing this kind of situation we are in right now?
Yeah, totally. Technology is also a very important part. But what I wanted to say is that technology is mostly add to the efficiency in this regard, right? I don't know if you are familiar with efficiency and sufficiency strategies. Efficiency is about decreasing the amount of energy used for producing one product, and sufficiency is about just decreasing the amount of product used. So if we are talking about efficiency, technology can play a very important role, but I doubt that technology can be very helpful when we talk about sufficiency. And what we know now is that to achieve sustainability goals, we need sufficiency. And that's why, for example, as I said last week, we had the sufficiency summit in Paris, because now everyone came to the point, or most of the people came to the point, that sufficiency is bringing us more when we talk about sustainability. Yeah, but yeah, to answer your question, of course, technological progress help us achieving our goals. Yeah.
Okay, nice, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Samira, for joining us today and for sharing your work, your research, the collaborative work that you're doing, the different also parts of your work, you know, being an academic and a researcher, but also being an activist. I think that's great to see the combination of work that you do there. And something important that I take from this talk is what you said about not educating about sustainability, but for sustainability, and moving away from theoretical approaches or purely theoretical approaches to more practical ones. And I think your talk was a great example for that. So thank you for also giving suggestions for closing the gap. And I think that's something that we can all take into the different spheres that we walk and live in. So thank you so much. And all of you, thank you for joining us today. And the next fashion talk will be on the 1st of June, and Rahim or Rahman will be joining us talking about what role do creatives have in redesigning the world around them. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you particularly to Samira and everybody also for your questions. And we look forward to welcome you again, hopefully in person to AUP.
Thank you all.